Okay, let's take you through this quiz review for sections 5.1 to 5.4. Okay, so make sure you check all the answers, make sure you understand every single problem. And if something doesn't make sense, please come to me and ask. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is I want you to actually find the distance of all three sides, the lengths of all three sides using the distance formula. So A is at 0, 0. C is at 6 up 4. So it's 6, 4. And B is X is 6. The Y is -4. So you recall the distance formula is the square root of the differences in your X's squared plus the differences in the Y's squared. So when it comes to distance formula, it doesn't matter which order you subtract. So for my x's, 6 minus 0, 0 minus 6, because I'm going to end up squaring it. So I'm going to end up having the square root of 6 minus 0, which, like I said, was 6, and I'm going to square it. So I'm just going to show the 36 underneath the radical, okay? And then I'm going to add the differences in my y. So 4 minus 0 is simply 4. 4 squared is 16. We're going to ask the calculator what the square root of 52 is. Okay, because 36 plus 16 is 52. Second, x squared is the square root button. And then I type in a 52 and I see it's about 7.2. Okay, so the distance from A to C is about 7.2 units. Okay, then for C to B, we can see that the x's 6 minus 6 is going to be 0. So square root of 0 squared is just going to be 0. But then you're going to see that it's 4 minus -4. -4 minus 4 is going to be 8 or -8. It's going to be the square root of 64, which is simply 8. You could count the blocks. Okay, so from C to B, you'll see that it's 8. Okay, and then finally, from 0, 0 to 6, -4, we're going to have the square root of 36, because 6 minus 0 is 6. 6 squared is 36. And then -4 minus 0, it's going to be another 16, which we saw from the first part. It's also going to be the square root of 52, which is 7.2 when you ask the calculator for the square root of 52. So we're going to see that this is an isosceles triangle. So just based on the sides, two of the sides are congruent. We call that an isosceles triangle. Okay, then the next thing I want you to do is actually find the slope of each side. So slope is rise over run, or simply the differences in the y's over the differences in your x's. Okay, that was from Algebra 1 days. So when you do 4 minus 0, you're going to have a 4. When you take 6 minus 0, you're going to get a 6. That reduces to 2/3. Okay, the slope of AC is 2/3. The slope of a vertical segment, vertical line, it's undefined. Okay, undefined. You're going to end up, notice our x is the same, you're going to end up having to divide by 0 if you use the slope formula. So the slope is undefined. Here, it's going downhill. So if you do -4 minus 0, you're going to have a -4. And then it would be 6 minus 0, which is 6. It reduces to -2/3. So what you're going to see is, even though these are opposites, they're not reciprocals. So this is not a right angle. So these two, the only way this could possibly be a right angle is if the slopes are opposite reciprocals. We simply have opposites, so it's not a right angle. Okay, so we just simply say no. Okay, so that is a review of some concepts that we did earlier in the year. Okay, the next set of problems, we have to remember a little formula. The exterior angle is equal to the sum of the two interior angles on the opposite side. So Make sure you understand that. It's going to be a simple equation to solve. We take this exterior angle, which is a 4x minus 18, and we set it equal to the sum of the two remote angles, the angles farthest away. We have a 2x plus 6 plus 36, and this should be very easy for you to solve. So we're going to have 4x minus 18. We'll clean up this side. You're going to see that this is a 42. I'm going to add 18 to both sides, and I'm going to subtract the 2x. So if I subtract 2x, I'm left with 2x on this side. I add the 18, I'm going to get a 60. And when I divide by 2, I'm going to know that x is 30. Okay, and that's all I'm asking for. So I'm not asking to go back and plug it in. I'm not asking for the actual value of the angle. So we can stop right there once we solve for x. Okay, so the next one, very similar setup. We take the exterior angle, the 2x minus 5, and set it equal to x plus 70. Okay, another very easy equation to solve, so don't mess this up on your quiz. Subtract your x, you're left with an x on the left, you add a 5, and just like that, we have our answer. We know that x has to be 75. Okay, so make sure you understand that. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is you are going to write a congruency statement. Okay, so we have to make sure all the corresponding angles gets matched up. So I'm just going to name this triangle LJK. So triangle LJK is congruent. So now the order matters of these letters. So I need to make sure L matches up with the R. So I'm going to write R first, and you can see that this angle is congruent to this angle. So the L and R must match up. The J must match up to the T. Okay, J's in the middle, T must be in the middle. And then finally, the K and S match up. Okay, there's your answer. Okay, and you can see how the sides, if I underline the L and J, so LJ matches up with RT. You can see from the tick marks that that is correct. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to start with W. I'm going to say W, X, Y, Z, and V. Again, technically it doesn't matter how you name this first polygon, but I do need you to realize how everything matches up. So if I could pick this up and turn it to its side, you're going to see the W matches up with the L. You're going to see that the X matches up with the M, and so on. So it's very important that we get started correctly. So what we're going to do is W matches up with L, and then X would match up with M, and then I'll just continue that. N, J, and K. And everything has to match up. So again, you can easily check this by looking at, hey, here's my V, here's V. V matches up with the K. So if I could just visualize twisting this over and laying this on its side, the V and K matches up, and that's what's happening in my statement. Okay, so then the next problem, I tell you that these two triangles are congruent, so therefore all corresponding angles, all the corresponding sides have to match up. So we're supposed to find X, and we need to find Y. So the first thing I want to do is set up an equation so that we can figure out what X is. Okay, so if you look here, T and N, angle T and angle N must be the same. They must be congruent. So I'm going to fill in a 63. Okay, so I'm going to fill in, oops, you can't even see that. So I'm going to fill in a 63. And now I have the fact that all three of these angles have to add up to 180. I have an equation that I can solve for X. So I'm going to take my one angle, that's 3x. I'm going to take the other angle, and then the 93, and set it equal to 180. And that should be pretty easy to solve. So if you need a calculator to add those, it's going to be 156. You're going to subtract 156. You're going to get 24. You're going to divide by 3. And just like that, we know x is an 8. Okay, so then we need to be able to figure out y then. So the fact is they tell us what LM is. So LM will match up with RS. Okay, I'm hoping you can see that. LM is a 43. SR is 3x plus y. So we know 43 equals 3x plus y. The good news is we now know what x is, so I can replace the x with an 8. And this is a y, not a 4. So that's my y. Let's make sure it doesn't confuse anybody. That is a y. And we're going to be able to simply solve for y. So 43 equals 24 plus y. I subtract 24 on both sides, and we're going to see that y is a 19. Okay, so that's, again, your job is to set up an equation that you can easily solve based on the congruent polygons. Okay, the last two on this page, they have enough information for us to be able to solve. The fact is, we see a triangle with all angles that are the same, and if all the angles are the same, all the sides have to be the same. Okay, so there's not much work to do here. If this side is 10, that forces x to be 10. Okay, and we should know if we have an equilateral, it's equal angular, and all the angles have to be 60 degrees. 60 plus 60 plus 60, that is 180. Okay, and then finally on this first page, I like these problems. There's enough clues to be able to figure out all the missing angles. The fact is, here we have a triangle. This is 90 degrees. This is 40 degrees, which is going to force angle 1 to be 50 degrees. Okay, these two have to be complement. So if we have a right angle, the two other angles have to add up to 90. They have to be complementary of each other. That's where the 50 comes from. And here we have supplementary angles. So there's a linear pair. We have 50, and then that forces angle 2 to be 130. 4, actually, we can do vertical angles 50 and 3. So this has to be 50 as well because we have vertical angles. 4 and 2 have to be the same. Once again, vertical angles. So then if this is 50, this is 90, that forces angle 5 to be 40. So 40 degrees, which would force this then to be 140 degrees because, again, we have a linear pair. They have to add up. Angle 7, we have a right angle here. So this forces 7 to be a right angle. 90 plus 90 is 180. So that's 90 degrees. And it looks like I still need to do 8. We have 40. Well, 8 has to be 140 so that they both add up to 180. Okay, so that should be something that you can easily look at. Use your clues to be able to find the missing angles. Okay, so if you have any questions about that first page, please make sure you ask. Okay, for page 2, we have to solve for x. Okay, so x is up here, but we're going to also find all the other letters. Okay, so we know that we have an isosceles triangle. So two sides of this inner triangle here are the same, which forces these two base angles to be the same. So right away we can say W has to be 70 degrees. Okay, so then X, since these two are 70, that's 140. That forces X to be 40 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to put a 40 there. And then for y, if w, which we found was 70, that forces y to be 110. Because together they have to be supplementary. They are linear pairs. So the two angles have to add up to 180. And so then we have enough information then if this is 110, and I'll use my calculator to show, I simply add the 110 and I add the 25, and then I can take 180 minus, and we get 45 degrees. That forces z to be 45 degrees. Okay, so again, there's enough clues for you to be able to find the missing parts. Okay, so then I have a triangle that we have to realize there's certain angles that are the same. So this is, again, it's a horrible marking. So this and this, the base angles are congruent, which forces these two sides to be congruent, okay? And then I am telling you, so from here, you're supposed to see that this is an equal angular, so therefore it's equilateral. All these angles are the same, so therefore they're all 60, which tells you all three sides are going to be 7. So that's the key to set up an equation to be able to solve for x. We know this side has to be 7. We know this has to be equal to 7. And that's a super easy problem to solve, okay? That forces x to be a 4, okay? So again, look at the clues that are given, okay? So now we're supposed to classify the triangles by its side and its angles. So right away I can see that 2 of my sides are the same, the third side's different, so it's called an isosceles triangle. And the fact that we have a right angle, we call it a right isosceles triangle, okay? Here, all three angles are the same, all three sides are the same, so it's equilateral and equal angular, okay? And then this one, we can see that our two angles are the same, so this would be 45, which would mean that the two sides are congruent, which we can see. But then since these are 45, they add up to 90. That forces this angle to be 90. All three have to add up to 180. So once again, we have an isosceles right angle, okay? So if all three sides, if I gave you an example where all three sides were different, you would call that scalene, okay? So make sure you understand how to classify by the sides. Angles, if they're all less than 90, you call it acute. Of course, if you have a right angle, it's a right angle, a right triangle. And if you have an angle bigger than 90, we call it an obtuse triangle, okay? So the next part, we should be able to figure out what x is, okay? So the whole point of this is knowing these two sides are the same, so that makes these two angles. So I also have another angle here. So the whole idea is all three angles have to add up to 180. So what I'm going to do is write 3x plus 20 plus 3x plus 20 plus the 4x and set that equal to 180. Okay, but again, the clue was these two sides. We were told these two sides are the same, which forces the base angles to be the same. Okay, so all we're going to do is clean this up. I'm going to add up all my x's. There's 6, there's 4. That's a total of 10x. You add up all your numbers, 20 plus 20, that's going to be 40. You're going to subtract 40 on both sides, so I'll show it over here. It's going to be 10x equals 140. divide by 10, and for that problem number 9, we're going to see that x has to be 14. Okay, so make sure you understand that setup. Here we have, just like on the front page, we have an exterior angle. So 5x plus 7 is my exterior. Here are the two interior angles, and we have to say 5x plus 7, that's the exterior angle. That has to equal the sum of the two interior, non-adjacent. So x plus 15, 6x minus 26. Well, we should be able to easily solve this. So 5x plus 7. On this side, we're going to have 7x, and it's going to end up being minus 11. I'll bring my x's, the 5x I'll subtract, so we have 2x. I'll add my 11, it's going to be 18. I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm going to see x is 9. Okay, x has to be 9. Okay, so then this problem right here, we see we have a 90-degree angle, so that just means these two angles have to be complementary, meaning they have to add up to 90. So I'm going to distribute right away. So I'm going to have 6x minus 12 plus 3x minus 14. I know that has to equal 90. Okay, so we solve this. It'll be 9x minus 26. I'm going to add 26. That's going to end up being 116. And when we divide, don't panic. They don't always have to work out perfectly. You're going to get about 12.8 repeating, which I'll just simply round to a 9. Actually, I'll put an 8 with a line. That'll be a little bit more accurate. Okay, so 12.8 repeating is 116 divided by 9. Okay. This next problem, we have the same thing. So lots of practice with exterior angles on this worksheet. So we have an exterior angle. It is equal to the sum of the two interior angles that are not adjacent. And when you clean that up, that's right, 4x minus 18. This will be 2x plus 42. I'll bring my x's together, so I'll subtract 2x, so I'll have 2x on this side. I'll add 18, so you're going to end up with 42 plus 18, that's going to be a 60. And when you divide by 2, you'll see x has to be 30. Okay? And then this last problem, once again, we have a 90-degree angle, so this one should be pretty easy. The two angles add together and should equal 90. So this one looks pretty easy to solve. You're going to end up getting 5x plus 5 equals 90. 5x equals 85. And when you take 85 divided by 5, they get a nice 17. Okay, so x has to be 17. Okay, last two problems on this page, we need to be able to find x and y. And so find an equation that you can set up so that you can find one of the variables right away so that we're not solving a true system. Okay, so the whole point of these type of problems, we should be able to find x, and in this case, we'll find x first before we find what y is going to have to be. So x is over here, it's an angle. So they gave us these two pieces, and I need you to know that n matches up with u. So the first thing I need to do is figure out what n is based on knowing we have a 142-degree angle. Can't see that, 142 plus 24. I'm going to take 180 minus 166, and I know it's 14. Okay, so n is 14. I know n and u are congruent. So I know 2x minus 50 must equal 14. 2x equals 64. X has to be 32. Okay, so make sure you know where the 32 is coming from. And then that's enough so that we can then solve for y, because we're told NP, so NP is going to be the same as US, and US is 13 meters. So we have 2x minus y equals 13. The good news is we know x is 32. And you had a big idea problem just like this. This is going to be 64 minus y equals 13. I'm going to take 13 minus 64. I'm going to get negative 51. Okay. Negative y would equal negative 51. Therefore, y is going to end up being positive 51. Okay. So x is 32. Y is 51. Okay. And so same thing over here. We should be able to find what x is, and I'm hoping you realize angle F and angle B match up. Okay, so my B is my obtuse angle. It's a bigger angle. It's 135 degrees, and it should equal 10x plus 65. Okay, so that should be pretty easy to solve. You take 135 minus 65, you're going to see that it's 70, and you divide by 10, and you're going to see x is 7. Okay, so x is 7, and if I know x is 7, I need to then solve for y, and we're going to be able to figure out that y is part of this angle, part angle E. E and A. So we don't need it. You can actually find these as two separate problems. I don't need to know X to find what Y is. We see that A is 28, and we see that E is 4y minus 4. So I'm going to write 4y minus 4 equals 28. 4y equals 32. Divide by 4, and we're going to see that y is 8. Okay, so again, enough clues to be able to set up an equation based on the information, and you should be able to have the skills to solve. Okay, so again, it takes some practice. You had practice in big ideas with these type of problems. You have practice in our notes. So please look over everything to get yourself prepared for the 5-1 to 5-4 quiz. Question number 11. This one I like to do. These I'm hoping you're going to see pretty easy. We did a similar problem to this earlier, but you need to use the idea of all three angles of a triangle add up to 180, and also look for linear pairs. So like for number 1 here, we have a linear pair. So the outside angle is obtuse angle is 110. That forces one to be 70 degrees. Okay, so then we can see we have 70. We have 30 here, so that's 100, which forces this then to be 80. So angle 2 must be 80. 3 has to be 30 because they're vertical angles. So if this is 30, that forces angle 3 to be 30. Angle 4, you're going to see, is going to be a right angle because its linear pair is 90, so this forces 4 to be 90 degrees. Okay, so then 90 plus 30 is going to be 120, which forces 5 to be 60 degrees. Okay, remember all three angles, 30 plus 90 plus 60, that has to add up to 180. Okay, or look at its complements, 30 and 60 add up to 90. Okay, so then for angle 6, we have a 90 and we have a 35. You really need just its complement. 90 minus 35, that's going to be 55 degrees. So angle 6 is 55 degrees. We're going to see angle 7 is also going to be 90 degrees. So again, if this is 90, its supplement is going to be 90. Okay. And then for angle 8, we have to use the fact that we have vertical angles here. So if this is 40, it forces 8 to be 40 degrees. Okay, which then would force angle 9 to be 50 degrees. Since we need a complement of 40, it will be 50 degrees. Okay, so I'll squeeze in a 50. And then angle 10 is the supplement to 35. So 35 degrees here. So 180 minus 35 is going to be 145. And then let's label that. And then finally, angle 11, we have to add the 50 and 38 together and then subtract that from 180. So 180 minus 85 is going to be 95. So that forces this to be 95 degrees. Okay. So again, you should be able to recognize what type of angles you need to refer to be able to find the missing angle. Okay. This next part, we're just based on looking at two congruent triangles. So we're told, we're given this. A lot of times it's easier just to look at this statement so that you know what's being matched up. So when I see YZ, I know it's the same as NL. So YZ, this right here, has to be congruent to NL. NL. Okay. And then when I see XZ, I see XZ here. I see XZ here. I know it's going to be congruent to MN. MN. I can tell just by the congruency statement. Okay. And so let me see. Oh, I actually looked at that. Sorry. I have the wrong. I looked at it incorrectly. This is XZ. So XZ is ML. ML. So again, just it's very important to have things match up. The order of these letters matter. Okay. When I look at my angle, angle N has to be the same as angle Y, and angle X has to be the same as angle M. Okay. So now they actually want you to find the measurements of angle M. So we have M and X. So X, I'm telling you, is 33. That forces M to be 33. Okay, so make sure you understand that. For Z, so this angle right here is going to match up with angle L. So we need to realize we have to add 124 and 33 and subtract that from 180. You're going to see it's 23. So L is 23, which forces Z to be 23 degrees. Okay. And then the side ZY, so ZY is identical to LN, which has a length of 12 units. Okay. That's the game you're playing. Okay. We just match things up. And then we are told, use the diagram to complete the statements. So I am telling you NJ, so we need to identify NJ and NM. They are congruent, so that forms a big isosceles triangle, and therefore the base angles. So angle J and M must be congruent. Okay. So then they have LM. So LM, which is this. Let me erase these. Okay. I have L to M is congruent to L to N. Therefore, these base angles must be the same. So angle M. And now, since this angle here can refer to lots of angles, you just want to say angle N, you want to use 3 letters. So I'm going to use LNM. LNM, which is this base angle right here. Okay? So then the next thing we have to look at, they want us to look at NKM, which is this. And they want us to look at NMK, which is this. So if these 2 base angles are congruent, that forces the sides opposite to be congruent. So K to N, and then M to N. Okay, so make sure you are identifying the angles and sides that are being given to you. Okay, so this last one, we have angle LJN, which is this right here. And then we have LNJ, which is this. Okay, so I'm telling you, these 2 angles are congruent. Therefore, the 2 sides have to be congruent. Okay, so did I do that correctly? So L and, oh, I'm looking, sorry. I'm having a hard time seeing today. L and J is this right here. Okay, so L, N, and J, and we have L, J, N, and therefore J to L, and we have L to N. And again, the order doesn't matter. So if you, on your paper, you have LJ and you have NL, you're correct. You're referring to the correct sides. Okay, so, but that's the game. You have to mark up your paper on your quiz to be able to identify the correct angles and therefore the correct sides. Okay, so we're dealing with that 5-4 section where we have isosceles triangles, and if 2 sides are congruent, the base angles are congruent. And we also have its converse. If I have 2 angles that are congruent, that forces the 2 sides to be congruent. Okay, so that is section 5-4. We're going to end this review with 2 relatively easy proofs. And most all these proofs are the same. These side angle side proofs have basically the same reasons. So you just have to look at what is given. So in this case, we are given that AB and CD are parallel. So you can mark that we have parallel lines. So these 2 lines are parallel. And we're also told that AB and CD are congruent. So I'll not only use a direction arrow to show that they're parallel, I'll also use a tick to show that they are congruent. So that is given. Okay. Then I'm going to show that CB is of course congruent to CB. Okay, so we have sides, and then we have another side that, of course, we share. We share that side, so we have CB is congruent to BC. You could also say CB, but that is our reflexive. Think about looking in the mirror. We see the same thing. So reflexive property of congruency. So make sure it's POC since we're using a congruent symbol. Okay, so now all we need to do is establish our included angle. Okay, we need to be able to, so that we can show side angle side. So we have this angle and we have this angle, and it's real easy to show that they have to be the same. Okay, and that's what this third statement is. we have angle ABC, which is this angle, and we have DCB, which is this angle. You just have to know what type of angles they are. So we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal. We have alternating interior angles. So we have a theorem that says, hey, if we have alternating interior angles, they must be congruent. So that's alternating interior angles theorem. Okay, they have to be congruent. And now we establish side angle side, side angle side. There's your last reason. Okay, we can then say that the entire triangles are congruent. So as long as we can prove a side, the corresponding angle, and another side, if we can prove it that they are congruent, the entire triangle has to be congruent. Okay, so 16 is going to be very similar. Okay, a couple more steps though, because I tell you that we're dealing with perpendicular lines. So what's given is that we have BD is perpendicular to AC, and we'll know that perpendicular lines form right angles. Okay, so we have that's going to be a given. And then I also tell you that it bisects AC. So BD bisects AC. So that's given. And then you can even see we have the tick marks. We'll know that these two segments have to be the same. And so that's what statement 3 is. AB must be congruent to BC because that's what it means to be a segment bisector. A bisector divides in half. So definition of segment bisector. Okay, that was given. It bisects, it cuts it into two equal parts. So we now have that established. And then we have the statement that we are dealing with right angles, and that's because we were told that they're perpendicular. So that is the definition of perpendicular lines. Okay, that was given. And as soon as our brain hears perpendicular, we know that they're 90-degree angles. So we know that if they're 90-degree angles, they have to, all 90-degree angles are congruent. So now I can say that ABD is congruent to DBC. That is because right angles, so right angles are congruent because there is a theorem that we were able to prove that all right angles, it should make common sense that if we are dealing with right angles, 90-degree angles, they must be congruent to each other. 90 equals 90. Okay, so then the last side we need to show, it's this included side. Okay, we have to show BD is the same as DB, and that is once again the reflexive property. So the reflexive property of congruency. And by showing side angle side, we can then state what we wanted to prove, that the entire triangle, everything in the triangles match up, that they are congruent. But the last reason is side angle side. Okay, and it's clearly that's what we established. So I am hoping that you are taking the time to make sure all these problems make sense, that you can do them, that you go back and look at some of the problems that you submitted in Big Ideas, just to have your brain make sure that you understand the reasons behind everything. Okay, so hopefully that hard work will pay off with a good quiz grade. Okay, and that's how we're going to end this marking period. So please contact me though if you have any questions. Take care.